panel investigating whether Bresch earned an MBA degree in 1998 says she did not. The panel also looked at why WVU officials decided to change her transcript last fall, adding 22 credit hours to indicate that she earned the degree. This all came after the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette called WVU to verify Bresch's resume after she was named Mylan Pharmaceuticals' chief operating officer. The investigative panel concluded WVU officials showed seriously flawed judgment in granting Bresch the degree. Emily Corio reports.
Welcome, everybody. Left Reckoning episode 35. Bolsonaro's bus Bozos. And Manchin's EpiPen Faildaughter. Hello, I'm Matt Leck. With me, as always, David Griscom. Hello, David.
How's it going, brother?
It's going well. I am sort of jazzed after our discussion with Brian, which I'm excited to show people. And also excited to talk about a concept that hasn't got enough attention, I think, is the Faildaughter, which is Heather Bresch, Joe Manchin's daughter. But yeah, how are you doing, David?
I'm good. I mean, I too am very excited to share a conversation with Brian Mier. What's happening in Brazil? It's one of those conversations that I feel very privileged and lucky to be able to have with folks because there was a lot of kind of freak out about the striking images in Brazil that were being shared without the necessary context. And I think that it's an important thing for us in the US left to make sure, that we're reacting appropriately to things, and what was happening there was bad, but sort of understanding the overarching scenario is going to be really, really critical for figuring out how to get out of the problem. So I'm looking forward to sharing that conversation.
Yeah, Brian's perspective, taking it seriously and also being clear-eyed about it, because he has skin in the game.
And also being able to laugh at the insane shit. Too,
exactly,
which
yeah.
is important as well. That's coming up in just a little bit. And then after that, we're going to be talking about a continuing story, unfortunately, about the assault on democracy in Buffalo. It's always amazing whenever socialists seem to win elections, democracy seems not to very much matter to those in power.
The threats of democracy. I mean, this comes from the New York Times, which is, ironically enough, a wing of the sort of centrist assault on democracy going back to the 1850s. But this is just reported by them, if you search centrist anti-democracy, that the threat does seem to come from the center, that they're the ones talking about, the extremes on both sides, if we could just do without them. And one way to do without them is just say, make it easier mainly for the suburban bourgeois to vote. And that's the trend we're taking in here in America.
And also, since we're just sort of pitching things too, make sure check out tomorrow, I think, around 2 Central, 1 o'clock, 2 Central, I'll have to decide later. I'll be doing a Griscom stream, and I'm going to be talking about the end of the unemployment benefits and what that means for American workers across the country. So don't miss out on that.
Yeah, a topic that I would say ranks fairly significantly ahead of your kids have to wear masks in schools as far as the coercive tyranny of the government. This is literally through government policy, a cracking of the whip, get back to work. One that doesn't even seem to have an effect in states that have done it. I'm sure you'll get into this. It hasn't driven up, but to paraphrase an Atlantic writer, I think Adam Sewer, the cruelty is the point. I think when it comes to that,
no doubt about it.
So let's move our attention to the Senate. Joe Manchin over the weekend said it was time for a strategic pause when it comes to the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package. Now, I am very afraid that, so let's talk about the quick conversation. Should the progressives blow it up? My inclination is that they should, but I think we should be clear-eyed that isn't going to mean you're going to get it and they're going to fold, because Manchin is the type of guy who conceivably could walk away from that. He's a freak. His daughter got a huge payout from being a pharma exec. We'll talk about more of that later. But so far, the newest signaling is Bernie said, we've already compromised a lot to get down to $3.5 trillion, which is, of course, the right response. And Chuck Schumer said full steam ahead. So that's where we're at when it comes to the Senate reconciliation package. I'll believe it when I see it. Similar to like the sort of PRO Act stuff. I want to believe that stuff so much, but it's like we talked about press release Joe. You can't trust him until it's in your pocket. Like you get all these sort of promissory notes. I don't know if I'm using that term correctly, but that's what it seems like it is. But yeah, go ahead.
And everything we've seen from the way that the Democratic Party is governing, under the Biden administration too, has shown us that, they're very willing to sort of peg it on a villain, right? Like I'm sure within the party, they're mad at Joe Manchin, but he also provides a lot of cover for people to basically have, private concerns about things and make sure their donors are happy, and then sort of direct all the anger at, Joe Manchin.
Because it kind of works for him electorally, but he might stand for a lot of politicians. I mean, there's a reason Chris Coons is so often taking flack right alongside him. And Chris Coons, of course, is Biden's home state, but pal. So, but we're going to do our Blair Mountain segment with Chuck Keeney for patrons, but we will deliver on West Virginia today, unless you wanted to talk a bit more on the reconciliation package. But
no, I'm good. Let's
deliver on the West Virginia a little bit. So Heather Bresch, Mylan CEO, there's this article that come out, Ryan Grimm. Heather Bresch, Joe Manchin's daughter, played direct part in EpiPen price inflation scandal. Now this is... I mean, when people talked during the Martin Shkreli thing about how actually this is just normal business, like this is a good proof of that. Right down to the emails of Bresch, who, let's just get to some of those. I'll share this story from Ryan Grimm. Heather Bresch, former president. So basically the deal is this. Pfizer and Mylan, Pfizer had a competitor to EpiPen. They, I don't know if you can have a better grasp of the business details here, David. But basically, so Pfizer bought a producer of a part to that EpiPen was using to produce.
Basically an alternative.
Right.
And they were negotiating privately with Mylan, to keep the prices of their competitors. Basically, they it comes up later here. Yeah. In that discussion, you indicated that you would be divesting your Adrenaclick product once the Pfizer King deal closes, right? So essentially, they're trying to get a deal to make sure that they don't have any competition, which would allow EpiPen to increase the price of EpiPen.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And yeah, we read that. I'm sending you this email as a reminder that you sent me the confirmation, which is like very laying it out, explicitly. And I can't, I'm distracted because I want to get right to how she got this job in the first place.
Yeah, we shouldn't just skip over this because this is absolutely egregious. This is a great example of how capitalism doesn't really breed, fair prices and accessibility for all. In fact, you have two massive pharmaceutical companies essentially operating together to do price fixing. And price fixing on a drug that should be readily available, that can be readily available and cheap for folks. And
a competitor was on the way. Pfizer had this Adrenaclick product and they started converging on basically the suppliers for different, not the drug, but the different parts of it. And instead of saying, okay, we're going to compete against you, Mylan, instead they said, you know what, let's see if we can come together, do a little business. We'll back off on even doing Adrenaclick, and we'll just reap, both of us, the benefits because we're also invested in this company that provides something needed by the Mylan EpiPen. Right.
And again, it very clearly shows how putting profit first does not create these kind of equitable outcomes that a lot of free marketeers or libertarians put forward, because it can be just as profitable to make deals on other things to basically do price fixing as an industry, right? That happens all the time. And this is an extremely cruel version of it, because it means that people either are not receiving medicine that they need, or people who need to have an EpiPen in the house, right, are paying, through their noses for it.
Yeah.
And they say later in the piece, Ryan Grimm notes some of the market research that Mylan did, where they interviewed people who were caregivers to folks who might need EpiPens. And they said explicitly that, of course, I would pay any price to make sure that my child doesn't die.
Yeah.
And remember, that's the kind of market that these people are in. Yeah.
Yeah, if I had to go from 1-pack to 2-pack, I'd do it no matter what it cost. Of course, I'd like to save money by switching, but my son's life is worth more than a few dollars, and I never risk it. And also, to just double back to the 1-pack versus 2-pack thing, what happens as soon as they develop this monopoly? Do they reinvest those profits into better research and development, into future life-saving drugs to make your kids healthier? No, they come up with a thing that, like, I don't know if you need a business degree from West Virginia University, just to foreshadow the part I'm eager to talk about, to come up with Project X2 or Project Times 2, which is, now that Pfizer's just decided, oh yeah, we're not going to do adrenoclick, let's just make money on producing this stuff together, you come up with a little thing called Eliminate the Single EpiPen. And look at
the true innovation, right?
Exactly. Why? Double the revenue per RX of 2-pack versus single. And then 2, strong potential generic defense. So a market reason. We want to make sure no generics. I don't quite understand the rationale for that. Maybe some business psycho could describe it to me. And then let's just go here. Just this email. Hi, Ray and Poonam. I hope you're having a great weekend. I'm imagining the show Corporate. Have you watched that at all? It's decent on Comedy Central, but senior management is having a meeting with Heather, April, and wanted to provide her with an update on Project X2. Again, this is just the thing that now we have a monopoly. We can force people to buy 2-pack.
Oh, this is beautiful, though.
I know that you were working on creating a medical rationale for Project X2. So listen, can we appreciate what we're seeing here?
Yeah.
We've decided that we want to sell a 2-pack, and literally saying, I know that you were working on creating a, quote, medical rationale for Project X2. I'm pulling a slide deck together that will be used. Would you be able to forward the information I should include for the rationale and the way it should be worded? Lloyd would like to review this deck on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., so I'd appreciate having it on Monday, end of day. So...
absolute bloodsuckers. Literally in the truest sense, right? Honestly. I mean, these people are preying on folks on literally on their life force.
Yeah. You it's getting to be spooky season. The fall is going to be a lot of horror movies in the theaters. Count how many bodies that maybe the monster movies you'll start to compete here, but like the slashers, they put up like maybe a couple dozen. These people, the amount of suffering and just across a huge amount of people, and just Project X2, utterly disgusting. So now let's move to the thing in the cold open. Heather Bresch got her job at Mylan.
Can we just remind people again who Heather Bresch is?
Heather Bresch is the daughter of Joe Manchin. By the way, her mom is, I believe in the Grimm story, reportedly lobbied to make sure schools are really stocked up with EpiPens. So the whole family's getting in on this. But let's focus in on Joe and Heather here. And I got a church. So 1992. Heather needs a job. Joe Manchin is a state senator in West Virginia. He is at a West Virginia basketball game, sitting next to the Mylan CEO, says, hey, my daughter needs a job. She's hired as a clerk, eventually works her up to the executive suite, becomes the liaison to, how is it worded, government relations or something like that, which, government relations, because, my dad's a fucking politician, soon to, if not governor yet, going to be governor in like a few years. she apparently allegedly she graduated in 1998. Now, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette did some digging on that, and they're like, hey, wait a second. It doesn't appear that you did. The school first said, oh, yeah, the registrar's office, the very first time they're confronted with this, say, oh, you're right, this is very strange. A few days later, though, come to find that, no, actually, she did graduate. There was just a little snafu regarding payment of a fee, which, is a kind of ecology thing. Now, a little bit more digging into that showed that actually a fee, first of all, why would a fee stop this department from sending grades over? Mm-hmm. And second of all, with that that description, like a fee issue, you would imagine that there's maybe one class that didn't send grades over, right? She did 26 credits of the required 48. So she basically did half the school. They tried to claim that it was work experience, but work experience you still have to clear with an advisor and pay tuition for, right? It's actually a kind of a scam for universities, right? They get to send you off to a business and get money for it, which is nice. So anyway, a review determined that actually, yeah, we lied. The university lied. Joe Manchin was the governor at the time. The university just lied about her having gotten a degree. They credited her with one when she shouldn't have, and then lied about, made up multiple bullshit excuses. And then, obviously, I'd say the EpiPen stuff, a little bit worse. I'm not super concerned, frankly, with people lying about on their resume. I think getting your dad, or maybe not, because actually, to even spread a little more incestuous picture, the guy who was the president of West Virginia, also former lobbyist and consultant for Mylan. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, pharmaceutical companies, I guess they just have a company state in West Virginia.
No, they prey on them, and it's extremely nasty. At the end of the day, though, what Manchin's daughter learns here is that, business gets to run the state, it gets to run the universities, and it runs the government, right?
That's the point. I was going to say, I guess, I don't think you need to get the degree, because I'm pretty sure the Pfizer executives that also agreed with them to do price fixing, they probably did finish their degrees. It's a really rotten, disgusting industry. And doing so, and I really recommend reading the Grimm piece, because you see how conscious they are of the blowback. It's all gauged to that. That's all their fucking job is to realize how much blood they can suck before people start screaming about it. That, it's literally their number one concern about, it seems like we can do this. Nobody seemed to care when we bumped it up this much. We can do a little bit more. Let's squeeze it more. And that's who gets promoted in American corporate society.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is obviously ideas of America being a meritocracy are complete BS. But also what you get on the other side of it is, somebody who's been given everything and every opportunity in life, using that opportunity to basically price fix critical medicine for people, leading to deaths and despair for so many. Beyond it just being unfair in the sense it's it's hard for everyone else to get a leg up or to compete. The end result too, right? What these people are being propelled to do is just pure evil. So
yeah. It'd be one thing if it basically worked, but yeah.
Send your kids to run the Texas Rangers.
Exactly.
Bush. Don't keep them away from politics and keep them away from pharmaceutical companies, right?
Jesus. Yeah, this in the same context of the Sacklers getting off. Basically with the, don't do that so much. And man, if anybody benefited from sort of corporate liability protections, those motherfuckers, Jesus.
Yeah. And, we have to continue to try to put pressure on Joe Manchin and, encourage people in West Virginia to take hold of their history and reject him. And we'll definitely be talking about that later this week when we put out our episode on the Battle of Blair Mountain.
I am so excited about this Battle of Blair Mountain. The Road to Blair Mountain book by Charles Keeney has a great concept of finding your own Blair Mountain, which is like which is something that I like very sensitive to, because like learning about your local history, that makes you fluent to the people you need to be talking to. Like if you can teach them something about the world that they live in and why they're there, I mean, it opens up, I think, a lot of people's hearts to you.
And I wasn't able to find a video of it, but for some of our friends on the ground in West Virginia over the weekend, who were celebrating the 100-year anniversary of the battle, apparently Manchin shows up and got confronted by folks.
Oh, nice.
Which is good, right? And that's why like having that kind of history is really critical too, because it gets the heart beating a little bit. It reminds us that we are radicals and revolutionaries, and that we don't have to just stand for the status quo, because it doesn't work for us and it only works for them.
Yeah, and it's like, now like you get a better sense of what to stand for. It's not like this sort of nebulous like 90s like advertising, like take a stand, let's all take our stands, like that sort of thing. It's the same shit that was spoken of in hushed tones when you're growing up. So I'm very excited. That's patreon.com/leftreckoning. We're close to 900, so if you need another reason besides that, this is going to be a banger episode. Help us get to that milestone. So
yeah, well, definitely, and then in that you'll be getting the post game as well. We're going to be taking a little bit of a dive into Governor Abbott, along with taking people's questions and much, much more. Oh
yeah, I got a big FBI. Turns out the FBI in Minnesota, it's a little bit of a racism issue.
If there's a little bit of racist, Matt.
Breaking news. I don't sit down for this one, folks. But it's another whistleblower story as well. Terry I need to get the name right. Albury, I think. But
Albury, yes.
So anyway. Unless you have anything else you want to say, I think we'll get to this interview with Brian.
No, let's put it on.
All right, here we go.
Welcome back, everybody, to Left Reckoning. David Griscom here, along with Matt Leck. And we're joined by our good friend, Brian Mier. Brian's work you can find a lot of different places. Tell us, sir. Also, many great interviews on TMBS. But most importantly, you can find his work at Brazil Wire. How are you doing today, Brian?
Yeah, pretty good. Tired, but the struggle continues.
well, yeah. Brian's been on the ground in Brasilia at this rally, and I mean, this is a huge news story, and I want to get obviously to this Bolsonaro event. We did a big in-depth conversation about a month ago with Victor Puggi about what's happening with the Supreme Court and the judicial system in Brazil in relation to Bolsonaro. But, for people who are just catching up, could you sort of set the scene before this big September 7th rally, and then we can get into the rally itself?
Yeah, sure. Bolsonaro wouldn't be president if it weren't for the Supreme Court, because they made an exception to the Constitution to allow Lula to be jailed during an election season in which he was like 20 points ahead of Bolsonaro. As the leading candidate, he had more support than every other candidate combined in Brazil's multi-party election system. And, so they're not known as being really ethical, let's say, and also it's not like they're made up of leftists or something. But I think what happened is they began to realize that the deterioration of the state of law was eventually going to come back and bite them as well. And so they've started authorizing a series of corruption investigations against Bolsonaro and his children. His son Flavio is accused of basically years and years of payroll skimming. He had a bunch of ghost cabinet members, some of which were members of a paramilitary militia who were kicking back 90% of their salaries to him. And so that's under investigation now. And then there's this COVID-19 vaccine procurement scandal where vastly overpriced, maybe you guys talked about it on the other show, but basically a holding company in Singapore that's address is listed in the Panama Papers, charging $40 million for like a small amount of vaccines. And so Bolsonaro is accused of like felony malfeasance in that. In other words, he knew what was happening and chose not to do anything about it because it was some of his cronies.
Mm-hmm.
And so this has caused them to heat up the rhetoric against the Supreme Court. Ever since he took office, his cabinet members and supporters have been begging him to shut down the Supreme Court, like fascist style, just start shut down Congress, shut down the Supreme Court. His son said all you would need is a few soldiers to shut down the Supreme Court in 2019. And Sarah Winter, not her real name, fascist leader, ex-leader of Femen Brazil, was arrested for leading a tiki torch protest in front of the Supreme Court, calling for violent attacks on the Supreme Court. And so they have some power to issue arrest warrants. And they've started issuing arrest warrants against people who are calling for their violent overthrow or assassination of individual members of the Supreme Court. Brazil has different freedom of speech laws than the US. It's more similar to the German system. For example, hate speech is a crime. Being a Nazi is a crime in Brazil, and they don't have a lot of punitive damages in civil lawsuits. So these are criminal offenses where, like, if you threaten to rape somebody or something in Brazil, you can go to jail. I mean, if you say it, even if it's just like not like a threat with a gun or something like that, if you're just like threatening in conversation, you could go to jail for 3 years. And so they've ordered the arrest of some people who are pretty close to Bolsonaro. Most recently, this ridiculous fake country singer, multi-millionaire cattle rancher guy who has a fortune of around, I don't know, $80-90 million, who's 81, with this cowboy hat. He called on Facebook Live for people to have an armed invasion of the Supreme Court, and he got arrested and crying, begging them not to take him to jail. But also the leader of the so-called Mensalão scandal, which in 2005 almost led to the downfall of the PT party. It led to the arrest of top advisors, this guy named Milton Jefferson. He essentially just completely fabricated this scandal, and it became part of this myth about PT being especially corrupt that made its way into all kinds of writing in English language about PT and corruption. And it's been totally proven to be as false and full of holes as the Lava Jato scandal. So that guy is in jail now too for the second time. And as the net tightens around Bolsonaro, he's getting more desperate, and his popularity has dropped down to like 23% or something like that. And so as he gets more desperate, he gets more dangerous. And the fact is, even though he's only got 23% support among the population, maybe half of those supporters are absolute fanatics. As you could imagine, like the most crazy QAnon and Trump type supporters or something.
Yeah, and on top of that, he has already been sort of sowing doubts about the validity of the upcoming presidential election, right? One of his major demands has been that they have to use paper ballots, which has been sort of rebuked, correct?
Well, just to add something to this, he believes that the election in the United States was illegitimate because of the paper ballots. So he doesn't believe that Biden is the legitimate president because of the paper ballots.
Right.
But in Brazil, he's preemptively saying that if they don't have paper ballots, it's going to be illegitimate. There hasn't been a case of election fraud with the electronic ballot system since it was installed in 1996, because the ballot are not connected to a network. They're all, they all have to be tallied individually. So they're very hard to hack. Like someone could hack into one ballot box maybe, but it's not a system that's, it's a very secure and it's a fast system. They get the results the same night. It doesn't take like 3 weeks of lawsuits and things like that.
Well, of course. I mean, and the fact that he's all over the place with, which ones are fraudulent, which ones aren't, sort of exposes that it's much more about just sowing doubt than anything.
Yeah.
I think
it's not about the truth, right? With these guys, it's not about you don't need to maintain any kind of rational continuity with any kind of argument with them. Well, it's all just like empirical cliches.
No, exactly. And I mean, well, let's get to this piece and some of the conversation you're having with people on the ground. People can check out this piece on BrazilWire.com, September 7th, the view from Brasilia. And I really like the tagline at the top, where you say, you know, the Supreme Court is still operating as usual. The coup was getting everyone to think one was about to happen. I mean, could you sort of take us through the events of the day? And again, for people in the US who might not have even seen the headlines about it, to sort of give them a quick reminder.
Okay, well, you know, the Bolsonaro and his people, his group, his supporters, announced that they were bringing 4 million people to the streets on September 7th, which is like the Brazilian 4th of July, Independence Day. And, you know, I didn't think it was going to be that many people anywhere close to that. And as it turns out, it wasn't, but there were still some pretty big protests. And so I flew up, I asked Telstar to fly me up here. And so I flew up on the night of the 6th. And, you know, I was on the plane. I didn't see any. I saw a couple people who were obviously going to the protest, but it wasn't full of like fanatical people in green and yellow shirts screaming for Bolsonaro or anything. It was mostly just like normal passengers. The airport was kind of empty. I didn't think anything was going on. But as I was driving in a taxi from the airport to the hotel, we went by this road that was just full of RVs and vans and a few buses and people just sitting out and like drinking beer and barbecuing and things. Like, well, this is actually going to be pretty good. It looks like most people came in by road, you know, like it's not. And so I got to the hotel and the hotel was just a mob scene of like tour buses arriving from little towns out in the countryside, full of people in identical Bolsonaro shirts. You know, it seemed like each bus had their own logo or whatever, but they were all uniformly dressed. And like, you know, so a lot of them pretty nice and stuff, but clearly like from rural areas. Like one guy just asked me like, how do I get a Coca-Cola out of this machine? I've never seen a machine like this before. Could you help me? He had never seen a vending machine. And then I met a couple who'd never been in an elevator.
Wow,
and this is an old trick that the rural political kingpins and bosses do in Brazil. You know, especially in the Northeast, but in the North too. It's like election season comes around and they'll send a bus into a town. They'll register a bunch of people from another town in a municipal election. And they'll send buses out there and they'll tell everyone, look, we'll give you like $30, 3 meals, a shirt, a pair of flip-flops. You know, do you want to come to this town for a day and vote? And they just this is like an old-fashioned thing they do. And it seems like, I'm not saying like that was what most of the crowd was, but it seemed like a good chunk of it was people who were brought in, who would have gone otherwise. And maybe they did like Bolsonaro, but they were clearly coming because it was a kind of trip. And also information has come out subsequently that yes, indeed, some politicians have been busted paying 100 reais, which is about $20 for people to come into the protest. And so that was part, you know, that was part of it. And then the night of the 6th, right? I was getting ready to go to bed. Around 9 p.m., all these videos started going on the air of what looked like a chaotic situation on the Esplanade, which is like the National Mall, where they have all the history buildings. A bunch of truckers, as it was being built at the moment, had like broken through this piece barricaded and stormed the National Mall. And so for a couple hours, all of these scenes were circulating. And I personally was just thinking like, you know, shit, I hope there isn't a military coup tomorrow. What am I going to do? Because I'm kind of a minor left celebrity in Brazil. I have a podcast with Natalia Urban that gets, you know, it's comparable in audience to like the Michael Brooks show was. Not that it's as good as the Michael Brooks show, but it just, a lot of people watch it. And so I'm a public figure. That's why so at that point I shaved my beard. You can see I'm clean shaven now because like if I'm going to go film this thing, I've got to go undercover. So and at the same time I suffered this massive troll bot attack with all these people threatening me, saying they knew I was in Brasilia and things like this. So I was getting very nervous. And then Gleisi Hoffmann, the president of the Workers' Party, who is a really wonderful, cool person, she just posted something. She's like, everybody relax, stop circulating these videos. We're just giving them publicity. This was all organized in advance. They went on to the Esplanade because the police let them in. Here's a video of what's actually going on in front of Congress and the Supreme Court. And it was just totally empty, totally locked down, the area around Congress and the Supreme Court. Then it came out what had really happened. After this hit the news cycle, international news cycle, as if there'd just been this violent storming of the Esplanade, it turned out that those truckers had a permit to enter the Esplanade at midnight. They arrived at like 9:30 p.m. with some friends, other truckers who didn't have their permits, but it was like 80% trucks that had permits to get in there. And they started like negotiating with the police to come in early. And so the police basically let them in 2.5 hours early. And a bunch of kind of drunk revelers just walked in with them. You know, the pedestrians had access anyway. So as the trucks rolled in, people ran up and, you know, started celebrating as if it had been this, you know, this kind of like coup that had just taken place, or victory or something. It was just all set up.
That's the question. Like, who is this for? Is this for to intimidate the left, or is this to like let the right wing blow off some steam? Like, what was that little, you know, parade for?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I feel like in a way it was a deal between the Brasilia military police and maybe got the Brasilia government. Brasilia is like DC, it's a federal district, in which they said, look, we'll let you pretend you've stormed the Esplanade, but you can't go anywhere near the Congress and the Supreme Court. Let's make a deal. That's kind of like so it did blow off steam,
right,
for them, but it also scared the hell out of a lot of people, you know, on the left. A lot of people were really scared because, after all, we're talking about a president who said that he could have solved the entire problem of the military dictatorship if he had just been able to assassinate 30,000 leftists, or communists, as he calls them, right? So, and a lot of people get death threats, and so you know, it was scary, and a lot of people were really freaking out, and I think that was the coup. You know, that first of all, it scared, you know, it scared a lot of people. It made the international news cycle, and then, as you said, Matt, like about letting off steam, then the truckers themselves didn't feel like they actually had to storm anything else after that. Although I'm learning now that a lot of these truckers are just hired. They're being ordered there by their bosses, by the trucking company bosses, and they're not even that ideologically committed to this.
Right.
But, you know, nevertheless, like the U.S. isn't like, I mean, the U.S., Brazil isn't like Texas or something where you can just go and buy a machine gun or something. There might have been a few pistols in the hands of some of these truck drivers, but that's no match for like a police force of thousands of people with machine guns, because the police have machine guns in Brazil. You know, so it's not like they would have been able to actually storm it. Well, it's just like DC, right? I mean, they wouldn't have been able to storm, in quotation marks, the Capitol building if someone hadn't opened the door for them.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, before we make more of those comparisons, actually, I wanted to, so like that's September 6th, right? And then the next day, there's the big march, which was supposed to be, as you were saying, a few million folk. It was significantly less than that at the end of the day. How would you make up like how would you describe the makeup of the people there? What were they wanting and saying?
Well, first, I don't want to sound like I'm saying it was a small protest or something. I mean, it was the second biggest protest I've been in Brasilia in 4 years. 4 years ago, I was in a union protest that had about 230,000 people that I filmed because it was ignored in the media and everything. And I felt like this was about half that size, which is huge, right? 115,000 people is not a small protest at all. It was really big. I got there and there was like, first of all, almost everyone was wearing green and yellow. I mean, blue appears on the Brazilian flag too. So I put on this Chris Bryant Cubs t-shirt I bought when I was back home a couple months ago, because his number is 17. And that's the campaign number from Bolsonaro. So I figured with like a mask on and sunglasses, clean shaven and a cap with this Chris Bryant jersey on, people would just think I was fine. And that's exactly what happened. Like everyone was treating me great. And then I I just used my smartphone. I didn't bring out the tripod. I didn't bring a tripod with me. I had my camera in a bag, but mainly I was just going with a smartphone. So everyone thought I was kind of like a blogger.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I brought out my regular camera, I was telling people that I was working for DW, Deutsche Welle Instagram page, because I don't even know if they have an Instagram page, but it's like, it's German. I'm working for German. Oh, German. I'm part German. We love Germany.
Jesus Christ.
Germany is the greatest. Oh, and there were these giant green banners hanging from all the buildings all the way down the side of the mall, right? It's these modernist like slab buildings.
Right.
And they all had like a face of a founding father on them with quotes of liberty or death and a Maltese cross on each one of them, a Maltese cross. Then everyone's in green and yellow, and they're war jets flying overhead, whatever, 1950s, whatever the Brazilian Air Force is using these days. No, they're actually probably Swedish, pretty good Swedish military jets. It's a Dilma bot. And then every time a army helicopter would go overhead, people were just like raising their hands in the air in joy and just like waving at these army helicopters and just screaming to them and stuff. And I started talking to people, and a lot of the people there were, I mean, I guess if you went to like a third big public festival in the 30s or something, you'd probably meet a lot of like really polite people talking and being nice to you and stuff like that. I mean, like, I felt like everyone's being super nice to me, but if I told them that I was gay or that I was a PT or a Lula supporter or something like that, it could have gotten really ugly really fast.
Absolutely.
So I was in the club as a white guy with telling people I was from Germany. I was definitely in the club, so they were nice to me. But I started interviewing people, and they were giving the most discombobulated reasons for why they were at the protests. Like, just didn't even make sense. One was just like, she had a sign that said criminalization of communism.
Jesus Christ.
And I was like, can you explain the sign? Yes, we're against the criminalization of communism of the toga, which is the Supreme Court, which has tried to transform Brazil into a communist country. It's why we like Bolsonaro, because of the criminalization of the toga. Like that, okay.
Yeah, talk about the chants. I think "I authorize" was sort of one of the things that they were chanting, as in like, we authorize, a coup, basically. Is that did I hear that right?
Yeah,
they were also chanting to like kill Lula and to imprison Lula, which
Jesus Christ,
pretty.
Yeah, I mean, so like, I think like the point is that like there's a lot you could ridicule, but it was it was a serious. Kind of frightening display of a kind of like really nasty reactionary hatred that is, unfortunately very prevalent.
No, I was thinking like that it was probably what it would have been like to be at a Nazi rally.
And I think what my concern, and what my like sort of big concern with January 6th in the States is like, is this a rehearsal for something in the future? Like, did like people like build connections that like this could snowball into like an actual attempt that does have some sort of like threat? What's your sense as far as like future threats from Bolsonaro? And
it's really hard to tell. I feel like we kind of got sucker punched by Steve Bannon and all the international figures who were helping design this whole thing, and I think they knew that it wasn't going to work, that it wasn't going to happen the entire time. And so in one way, maybe it was a kind of like testing of the waters. In another sense, it was just a move to like further delegitimize the rule of law in Brazil and democratic institutions, and just prepare people for rejecting the presidential elections next year. And I don't watch a lot of podcasts and stuff like that, but I actually saw Sam Sather say something about this I thought was really smart, which is that the whole point is that if the election comes within like 3 points, right? If Bolsonaro polls within 3 points, then his followers will be able to just say this was stolen. And this could just cause a kind of, a justification for a coup. And if Lula were to win by like 10 or 15 points, which now he's in the lead by over 20 points in the polls. But it just scares me about how quick social media psyops operations can just like flip people and build up this like this thing that just happened. It was really quick. They had 81,000 tweets going out the week before all of this by these bots. They counted over 2,600 bots asking people to come out to the streets, making up lies and like that. And I remember during the protest, they did something so quick. Not him was this big women's rally, like a week before the election, in which over 1 million women took to the streets in over 100 cities across Brazil, saying they wouldn't accept a president who's so sexist, basically. Remembering that he like made rape threats against a woman, congressman in the floor of Congress once and stuff. And immediately when the protest started, the right started bombarding evangelical Christian women, targeted audience of photos of like a slut walk protest that had taken place a couple months earlier, and said, this is what's happening on the streets right now. And Bolsonaro, one of the key demographics that won him the election was evangelical women's votes.
Damn.
Yeah, and I mean, I just have to make a note too. I mean, this is one of the fact that it's like so discombobulated and incoherent. It's like it's very typical of these kind of like super far right movements. It's like you can put on us like whatever image you want, right? Like Bolsonaro's going to solve this problem or come after this group, regardless of like how much that is true or not. I mean, it just is able to attract a lot of different people who already might have a very like tenuous grasp on like actual reality. So it is like a very worrying, because you can't really reach these people with like, oh well, he actually said this or that. Like they're already in their own kind of media sphere, bubble and way of thinking as well.
Yeah, I mean, they don't think. I mean, there are people who've lost 73% of Brazil, something like 73% of Brazilians have lost a relative or a close friend to COVID-19 so far. And there's still people who think that his followers say that it doesn't even really exist. It's like a communist plot. Someone actually told me yesterday, COVID is a communist plot to destroy the world's economy, invented by the Chinese communists.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And like the fact that we're so reliant on just-in-time production for all of our goods and services around the globe was another communist plot too, right? I just want to ask, because I was curious about this. I noticed in your piece, like there were a lot of signs that were in English. Is that typical just across the board, or is there anything to make of that?
That's very specific to Bolsonaro, and it just completely shows the influence of Bannon and the U.S. and international far right, because they don't even translate the right-wing slogans from the U.S. They just leave some of it in English, like fake news.
Yeah,
they say that in English. So yeah, like when I was attacked by a couple hundred bots the night before last, and one of the three main insults was that I was practicing fake news in English, fake news. So anything they don't agree with is fake news. And there are other things. I mean, there are all these. I mean, Bolsonaro even tried to stir up like anti-immigrant fervor when he was running in 2018, but Brazil's only like 0.7% immigrant. So, I mean, that's the one thing from Bannon and Euro far right and his friends like Beatrice von Storch, Hitler's granddaughter, and visiting one of the bloggers she is in jail now for trying to incite violence against the Supreme Court. Anyway, whatever. I forgot what I was going to say. I'm tired. Sorry.
We'll let you out.
Mid-thought.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it, Brian. I mean, I just want to play this clip of Bannon and Jason Miller and hear what your reaction is. If you have any more thoughts on the American-Brazil fascist alliance here.
So I want to bring in Jason Miller, who's live and been down there with President Bolsonaro and Getter. Give us a political update. What's happening there, and what's your feel for what's happening on the ground, Jason?
Well, Steve, great to be with you this evening. I'm glad that you're covering Brazil, where we are. Obviously, we launched Getter just 60 days ago. and Brazil is already the second largest country for us by users, approximately about 15%. We have over 250,000 people from the great country of Brazil who've joined the platform to actually embrace their free speech rights. But what I see here, Steve, is so much love and so much enthusiasm for free speech. And they're especially the folks who are the Bolsonaro supporters are being deplatformed, they're being shadow banned, they have the long arm of the law. I mean, it's some pretty nutty stuff. But one of the things that we're always going to stand for, Steve, is free speech, the ability for folks to express their beliefs. And in fact, I had a great conversation with a member of their Congress just the other night, talking about how their writing would effectively would be their version of a First Amendment for free speech rights. And I think that's one thing as Americans, too often we take for granted the aspect of free speech. But Steve, they're talking upwards of 500,000 proud patriots who will be showing their solidarity with their country members in the 199th anniversary of their independence.
Okay, so that's so they're doing all this under the banner of we're actually just free speech. We're just concerned about free speech. I mean, how it sounds kind of familiar to what's going on here a little bit.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Like Brazil's free speech is almost like an arbitrary concept, and different countries have different interpretations of what free speech is. And the Brazilian legal interpretation of free speech is similar to the German free speech. In other words, like you have to protect the freedom of people who are being violently threatened. That's part of free speech too. Like you should have the freedom of not, for example, if you're an African American, you should have the freedom of not being, having to listen to like lynching jokes in the workplace or being threatened with being lynched because that infringes on your personal freedom.
Right.
So in Brazil, you can't publicly advocate for like lynching Black people or any other minority group or anyone, because that violates the concept of freedom that they have in Brazil. And the funny thing about Bannon and Jason Miller is that they've discovered this. They're both now under investigation from the Brazilian federal police for not exactly violating free speech, but for not exactly for like breaking the law regarding to hate speech in Brazil, but it's related. They're being investigated for strengthening the ability of people to break the law with hate speech and violent threats on the internet as part of what they call this electronic militia, which is this Cambridge Analytica influenced group connected to one of Bolsonaro's sons, Carlos. He's a city councilman from Rio de Janeiro. A lot of people think he was involved in the assassination of Marielle Franco. They've got the sophisticated, they just came, they do things like they'll put people on salary to run 10 bot accounts on Twitter and just go on and argue with people all the time in a coordinated fashion from these different bot accounts. And they have like allegedly hundreds of people on the payroll doing this. And they have targeted WhatsApp groups, WhatsApp, because you can have up to 256 people in a group. So they have thousands of these targeted groups that they send misinformation to different demographics about. For example, during the election, they send information to hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people, that Fernando Haddad, who was Lula's replacement candidate, had distributed baby bottles in the Sao Paulo public preschool system when he was mayor, that instead of regular nipples had little penis-shaped nipples on them. And that's like one of the things that cost him the election. And they do things, this is illegal in Brazil. That's the point. They're importing this kind of stuff they do in the US that's not legal out here. As it wouldn't be legal like in France or Germany or in a lot of countries.
Yeah.
As you guys obviously know, that the concept of right to bear arms, the concept of free speech in the United States has been completely perverted, right?
Yeah. Well, it's also funny, like the projection, like the way that they are bussing people in. Every election we hear the Republicans saying, oh, they're bussing people in from wherever the hell to like swing Ohio. And like it's kind of like projection and sort of desire for your own capacity to do that thing. But man.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, I really appreciate you taking the time. We'll certainly be keeping our eyes on this. And, I mean, this, again, is just sort of a reminder for everybody why, what's been going on with Bolsonaro and this like kind of far right alliance is very serious. It's not something that could just sort of be ignored because they're ridiculous. So I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope we can talk about this sometime soon.
Well, it's always a pleasure. I just want to finalize saying that I believe that everything they're doing in Brazil right now is piloting tactics for the next presidential election in the United States. And that's why it's important for people to pressure the Democratic Party to cut ties with Bolsonaro instead of inviting him into NATO, which Jake Sullivan did 2 weeks ago, because it'll just be the Democrats shooting themselves in the foot again, like Carter, like a long history of Democrats. Why can't they get their act together and realize that what they're enabling here is going to come back and bite them in 2024?
Well said.
Yeah.
Brian Mier. Check out Brazil Wire, and I would try your Twitter. Give us your Twitter handle. I can't get it off the top of my head here.
Oh man, I think it's Brian Mier. Brian Mier.
Oh shoot!
I don't even know what my Twitter. I've got it.
We'll put it in the show notes.
I got here. Brian M. Tilliser.
Yeah, Brian M. Tilliser. I'm a total novice on Twitter.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
All right, great to. I'm muted for David.
You're muted, man.
Well, everyone else could hear me, but you couldn't. But welcome back, David, to talking to me. I was already talking to saying, it's good to be in touch with Brian again.
For sure. He's the real deal when he's having a little bit of difficulty remembering his Twitter handle. He's in it for the right reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. If you have a complicated Twitter and you don't know it, then you're failing the sort of basic self-promotion. But that's, he's got his focus in giving you really good reporting from Brasilia.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and people should definitely check out Brazil Wire if you haven't already. This upcoming presidential election is going to be really interesting to keep tabs on, to see how Lula does.
Am I right? 2022, but like fall, is it October?
Yeah, it's a while. It's a ways away.
They're like us, like just a huge lead up that's nauseating and everything.
No, none of them have officially, declared yet, to my knowledge.
Right.
I know Lula hasn't. It's gonna be a big one. That's why Bolsonaro's already trying to plant the seeds now. Why it's so insane that he's already doing what he's doing, which is why the fears that he might actually attack, the very center of democracy are a little bit.
Yeah, you get the sense like if you could be in the war room for Bolsonaro, they took one look at their popularity polling, and they said winning this thing the old-fashioned way is probably not in the cards. What's our other options? And that's terrifying.
No. Well, speaking of people who don't respect democracy, before we go to the post game.
Yeah, I just want to preface this by saying this is a little story that you might want to think about. Maybe Democrats could have done more to obscure this or that Trump judge or Republican judge. Well, sometimes there's a reason that they're not super upset about a reactionary judge being put in a certain position.
Absolutely not. And especially in the state of New York, where having those kind of, friendly right wingers can be very helpful for a kind of establishment Democratic Party interest. For people who are unfamiliar, in Buffalo, India Walton won a historic election as a, out and open Democratic socialist, as somebody who has firsthand experienced the struggle that working class people face in this country, someone who is fighting directly for her community and is rooted in her community, won their primary, the Democratic primary for mayor there. In a city like Buffalo, that pretty much means that you've won the position. And we covered first how the city council was trying to essentially destroy the position of mayor, to take away a lot of the power that it has. And that's still an ongoing fight, but that's a little bit more down the line because now there's already another attempt to try to undermine the will of the people, the results of that vote, and that has come because a right-wing judge, as Matt was just alluding to earlier, has ruled that Byron Brown, the former mayor who India Walton trounced in the Democratic primary in Buffalo, is now going to be allowed on the ballot, despite the fact that he has missed the filing deadline by months. And there's a couple things to note about it. Just on the top. One, the case is just ridiculous. And there is a potential that it might go to federal court and might be thrown out. We'll see. I'm not going to sit here and hold my breath on that. But there's a few things that are really ridiculous about it. One, as we said earlier, India Walton went up against Byron Brown, and she defeated him soundly in a free and fair election, right? One where he refused to acknowledge her or to debate her or to treat her like a legitimate candidate for mayor, right? And that strategy cost him dearly. Now, this person who has spent their entire lives as a member of the Democratic Party, including holding leadership positions in the New York State Democratic Party, all of a sudden has an independent streak to himself and is now running as, non-affiliated independent. It's a complete joke. And, Hadius Tier, who interviewed India Walton and Jackman, made a good point on this. It's amazing how whenever a leftist considers maybe running as an independent or third party candidate, they almost immediately get attacked by all of those members of polite society saying, oh, you're going to be a spoiler. This is dangerous. You need to respect whoever wins the Democratic Party primaries. Somehow don't have those kind of oppositions when an incumbent candidate is going to run against a socialist who won their election. This is one of those things where the class lines of this fight are very, very clear. It's real estate industry, it's wealthy folks, including Republicans, who are lining up behind Byron Brown because they're afraid of what a democratic socialist, what a working class politics would look like in Buffalo.
Yeah, and because they're like real estate paymasters are, right? And other industries, right? That's really what it's about.
And I wanted to, did I send it to you? Yeah, if you could pull this Jackman piece, I just want to read a quick quote from it. This is an interview done by Hadius Tier, which is in Jackman, just came out this morning, where she sort of goes through, one, these attacks, and two, what her kind of politics represent. And I think that, this is why it's so powerful. Yeah. So if you can scroll down, excuse me, sorry. If you can scroll down to the question, I understand that for a person like him, just control F that.
Okay.
Actually, that's where you're at is actually good too. This is a phenomenal answer. I really like this a lot. So she says the developer class has been a central part of his campaign, talking about Brown from the start. What have they and Brown been responsible for in Buffalo? India Walton says, I'm not against development, right? Which I think is a great way to frame this. Mm-hmm. I'm against development on the backs of and out of the pockets of the working class and taxpayers in the city of Buffalo. And that's what we've seen. We've seen big donors supporting Brown's campaign, and in return, they get large development deals, contracts, and tax breaks. We're having conversations about my willingness to work across sectors and across political beliefs, but not in a way that compromises my values. What I value most is people over profit. So there will still be development, but it's not going to happen at the expense of Buffalo residents and taxpayers. And it's not going to be a quid pro quo. There won't be a bunch of patronage politics in the Walton administration. Things are going to be just, equitable, and fair. And I think that's like, this is why she's such an incredible candidate and will be an incredible mayor. Because, she really gets it. It's like, it's not just some kind of like blanket thing, like, oh, we're not going to do development. We're going to make sure, we're basically going to pause everything that's happening in the city. No, what she is saying is that she wants to make sure that these things are for the people. And if you're in a city like Buffalo, or hell, most cities across the country now, you realize that most of these places aren't changing. But for the most part, they're not changing for the better. I'd also just note, I don't know how much
Tom Nichols. Sorry, just to allude to our patron show from a few weeks back.
Yeah. Well, no, I was just saying, like, the Buffalo Bills. Have you seen this? No. So the Buffalo Bills are trying to get a new stadium there.
Oh, right. So they're holding the city hostage.
100% paid by taxpayers. I mean, the guy even threatened to move the owner even threatened to move the team to Austin, Texas. If they don't get their demands, right? That's an example of something that does not benefit the people of Buffalo, to basically give, a rich person a free stadium for them to continue, to profit immensely off of the culture in the community, right? Like, sports teams really should belong to the people and to the communities that, they represent. And it's so disgusting, but it just sort of shows you how this guy thinks and interacts with the city of Buffalo, right? That's business as usual, is that you can sort of make these demands and have them met.
Yeah.
And India Walton is representing something that's very different from that. And that's why they're trying to knock her out.
Yeah. And Hochul, new governor of New York, decided she's not going to endorse. Presumably, you just endorse all the Democratic primary winners, but no, she's not going to endorse. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear why. It's like, it's no surprise to anybody. But it really is just amazing sometimes to see their hypocrisy. Do you have that video? It's in the chat. If we could just put it up for people, show them how to get involved. It's India Walton.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
Because if you're able to donate, this is a very important time, because, sometimes these campaigns, you think they're over, as you would expect after the election. But, this is going to take a little bit more work, unfortunately, to make sure that these results are respected.
Yeah. I mean, by a quirk of technology, one sort of possible leveling factor could be the ability to, like, nationally fundraise for someone like India Walton. Mm-hmm. Here's this.
My name is India Walton. I'm the Democratic nominee for Mayor of Buffalo. I'm coming to you to sound the alarm. We need all hands on deck right now. A corrupt, Trump-appointed far-right activist judge just overruled New York State election law in a flagrant attempt to bury our campaign. The establishment news media here keeps publishing dishonest hit pieces full of racist, sexist, fear-mongering with no evidence or corroborating sources. The wealthy elite are terrified that we're going to win and shift power from the ruling class to the working class. They may have money power, but we have people power. That's why I'm asking you to donate, sign up to phone bank and door knock, and get all your friends to do the same right now. Our democracy is at stake. Visit www.indiawalton.com now, today, to take action and save our democracy.
So please, we'll try to keep people up to date with that election, but this is something that's really important, and you can't let them get away with this kind of nonsense.
I mean, it's a typical crime of liberalism. This is what they do. This is what we're up against, and God bless India Walton in the way she's fighting this battle. I mean, if you're going to help somebody out, she's already won the primary. She's got the people on her side, helping her push this through. Because if that's the ball game, if he can't be on the ballot and he has to be written in, Walton's going to walk with it. I mean, unless he just spoils it for the Republican. But
and just to know one more thing, what's so disgusting about this guy is he refused to debate her during the primary.
That's familiar,
right? And now he's doing this whole like bullish tone. He's like, I'll debate you anytime, anywhere, any place, right? And exactly, it's like such a joke, right? You refuse to do it during the actual election, and now are acting like you're being silenced. It's so truly despicable.
So transparent, yeah.
But I think that's it for this week's show. We're going to be hanging out in the post game. Matt has a kind of expose on the FBI, which has been doing some quite unsavory things all across the country, but specifically in Minnesota.
I mean, yeah. Think of like the worst shit you've seen on a local news story about say the Muslim community. And just imagine that person with an FBI badge, and you'll understand how the FBI works in this country. Disgusting freaks. And we have a new whistleblower, Terry Albury, who, yeah, I mean, the stuff, there's some amazing quotes from this New York Times story, and Biden should pardon him yesterday, along with the other pardons he should dish out, if he wasn't an active and willing participant in the war on whistleblowers, which is a bipartisan war that continues, and we're not withdrawn from that one yet, it appears.
Nope.
So, but yeah, thank you, David. And patrons, we will see you in about 20 minutes. Patreon.com/leftreckoning to get the link to our post-game show. Peace out, y'all.